Welcome to the Rocky Mount Chamber Buzz. Today we are going to be speaking with Russell Proctor and Alan Matthews. Learn a lot about business both locally and across the state. On the Buzz, we always like to share really good news with you all. And today we've got Alan Matthews, who is with the Chamber. He is the Director of Economic Development. And Russell Proctor, former TV celebrity with Business
That's
Rocky
a
Mount.
stretch, Gene, but thank you.
But you're going to be talking
We got to flood it
about
out.
the state level. And you, and very fortunately for this area, Russell, have been on a committee that's a statewide committee that can be looking for opportunities and going to share a lot of good news from the state level. Alan, you have been for about how many years working with economic development?
15 years.
Wonderful. And you
24 years in marketing and sales preceding that. So marketing, no longer a tangible product, but marketing, the idea that Rocky Mount's a good place to do business.
Well, we agree. And you know, a lot of that, I think we're seeing more growth in small business than the larger businesses. But you kind of break it into you work with the Downtown Development, the Carolinas Gateway Partnership,
Correct.
and the Chamber.
There's three entities locally, and of course regionally, meaning the two-county MSA, Edgecombe and Nash County. Obviously, the Gateway Partnership, most people know, is the industrial recruitment side, covering both counties. My position, business recruitment, it is to recruit and encourage on the consumer spending side. I also work with hospitality, light industry, and many other things relative to the consumer spending side. And then there's downtown development, and obviously Mr. Gesso, I believe, is just
John Gesso, he's
John
great.
Gesso,
Yeah.
recently hired. So we all should and do hold hands on certain projects. So we work together from time to time. But there is a bit of a separation in what we all are responsible for.
Mm-hmm. What trends have you seen, Alan, as far as what's happening with small business and the importance of small business in Rocky Mount area?
Kind of went back and anticipating this program to not just give data from maybe a year ago, but I went back 20 years and to show a trend. But small business, and if I may just read off of this because there's a lot of numbers, but 64%, if you look at just the Chamber database, which is about a 750 membership, and we do have over 5,000 businesses in the Twin County area. But looking at that membership database and drawn down and measured by a number of employees, 0 to 10 employees, is 64% of the membership. Now, maybe not 64% of the total employees, but of the number of businesses. 64% of them operate between 1 and 10 employees. So over the last 20 years, there's 52% home-based. Some of the activity that you can say off of small business. 65% of the net new jobs gained have taken place in the small business arena. There's 28 million of these small businesses across our country, 28 million. 22 million of those are just self-employed businesses. So you hear it say it over and over again. It's kind of a mundane statement, but it is truly the economic engine of the country is what occurs in small business. They also are very well prepared to make change quickly. So they can do things that a lot of big businesses can't. And obviously, they provide a lot in the community besides just the jobs that take place.
Well,
So-
and Russell, you've been here, you grew up here, and I don't think you've ever, except going to Carolina, been anywhere else to speak of. But you know, you probably could reflect on the days when we were dependent on a lot of big banks, Hardee's, and whatnot. So things have changed, haven't they?
The question, there's been a huge transition in this market when you look at the decline from the financial services that were headquartered here, one-time Peoples and Planners, and of course I started in the savings loan business. There were at one time 5 savings loans in Rocky Mount, and so that has transitioned a lot, Hardee's, but by the same token, that has also spurned off a lot of small business. And now look at the community banks that we have available, as well as the large money center banks on that side, and then look at the businesses that are still in existence. and so forth. We just recognized Don Stallings with Eagle Transport. Look at the size of that business. I'm not sure we call that small business or big business, but so, there's still a lot of very strong economic business in Rocky Mount.
Mm-hmm. And I did mention you're with Stifel, investment advisor.
Thank
Stifel's
you.
located out of St. Louis. and
Right.
So I want to be sure everybody knows what your day job is.
Thank you. That does pay the bills.
And let's pull over into what you're doing, because in the beginning, Russell, I mentioned that you are representing us on the Job Development Investment Grant, JDIG, 2 years on that. What does that mean?
Well, we generally refer to it as JDIG in the acronym, and I would give Bill Daltridge, a local business person here, a lot of credit, because Bill helped write the legislation. Bill looked at a lot of the other states and what they were doing economic development wise and realized we need to be doing something different. And it is still evolving as we've gone to the private-public partnership. But Job Development Investment Grant Committee is a committee that is domiciled within the Department of Commerce. It is a 5-member committee. It is consisting of the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Revenue, and the Office of Budget and Management, and then 2 appointees in the state. I'm an appointee from the legislature, and there's another appointee. And the 5 of us work with the Secretary of Commerce and his department in making grants. And those are discretionary grants. They can be with a duration as long as 12 years. And obviously offer economic incentives. And effectively what we're doing is offering the tax rebate back to the company for what they would pay for employment taxes to the state of North Carolina. It's kind of interesting. There's been some publicity about JDIG and how effective it has or has not been. And I would expect to see within the near term the Secretary of Commerce making some announcements and talking more about what has transpired. The report talked about the fact that a large number, or not a large number, but some number of the grants had not been successful. Well, first of all, if they're not successful, that simply means we didn't fund them. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily view that as a negative. The fact is they may not have created the jobs that we anticipated. Every grant has a specificity, if we would, of the number of jobs that they're going to create. The other criticism that has been handled some has been that a lot of the jobs end up in the 2 major economic centers in North Carolina, i.e. Wake County or Mecklenburg County. Wake County certainly really being more the triangle. It's interesting that nobody's pointed out that any time there's a job incentive program awarded to one of those 2 areas, that 10% of that money gets set aside into North Carolina One, which Alan, I think you could speak to, which has really helped small business from the Oral Rural Center and so forth. So it's not all about just Mecklenburg County and the Triangle. So we're very fortunate. The state of North Carolina is an interesting state. We're the 10th, soon to be, I think, the 9th largest state in the country. We had the largest set of miles of any other state in the country. Transportation-wise. We have one of the largest network of rail in the state. We have 2 ports. And then you look at the education side of the equation and what we provide with the 16 university campus, and then the community college system, of which, Alan, you pointed out very quickly, we are very fortunate to have 2 campuses serving our area.
Growing campuses.
Campuses.
Ours are among the best.
And then let's don't forget, a major portion that I think gets overlooked. We have 10 military sites in North Carolina employing 100,000 people. But the important part of that is every year there are a number of military personnel that are well trained, that are coming out of those bases and retiring, if you would, from the military, that are seeking employment. And that's going to be a huge opportunity for us long term. So when you start putting all of that together, we have a very effective, if you would, equation for job recruitment in North Carolina.
Very, very well said, Russell. If I may interject, that the large businesses, which a lot of these incentives that we're now talking about focus on some of the bigger businesses industry-wide, and I can tell you what that does for small business. It certainly puts a bigger stress and demand on those existing businesses here. All of a sudden, you need another doctor, you need another business, another drugstore, you need another, all kinds of businesses that meet the needs of the people
Retail.
that need to come to the area. So consumer spending, which really drives 70% of our economy, benefits from a lot of things that you're talking about. And as you well stated, there's funding that goes into the rural area. And some of that has, if I may just share a quick story of a project on the east side, which I would define as an underserved area of our community. On Fairview Road, Edgecombe Shopping Center, we successfully, and we did create the number of jobs, and we did fulfill the duties all the way through. When I say we did, actually the developer,
Right.
Mr. Creighton out of New Bern, who focuses on doing what's called or what's titled in the industry second generation space. So they cannot afford to go into ground up new construction. And there's a lot of businesses that you see that go into those areas that do provide a needed service, and we could sit here and name them. But obviously Roses went in, and when they signed an agreement to do a 45,000 square foot lease for long term, you basically had the chicken and the egg put together. So Mr. Creighton comes in, takes this building, and I wish we had pictures to show, that was in a dilapidated condition. You could have dropped the helicopter into the roof and restored that building to what it is today. And what does that do? And it's because of this funding that
Right.
you were speaking about. It's created over 120 jobs, and it's filled 54,000 square feet of a 93,000 square foot, what the banking industry calls gray field, which is a deceased commercial property.
Deceased.
It's not in the dictionary, but that's
Well,
what
it
they
was
call it.
applied
It's
in-
not brownfield, it's grayfield, that's the industry. So there you go, and besides that, now you've got Dollar Tree that says, you know, we didn't want 2 stores in Rocky Mount, but now they're saying obviously that they do. So it's a catalyst to bring other things in again.
Right.
And I know it's small business, but we know that it's very important to our community, what the small businesses bring. So job, capital investment to exceed $5 to $6 million. How about not forgetting when you ride by the area and look, doesn't it look better? So it cleans up a blighted area. So that is at the Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development, and I believe you mentioned my position is really in partnership with the city. We all work together in all phases of the business, not just the large, but the small too. But certainly what was just being addressed is extremely important to our state, and we need to do more of it, not less of it.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about more what we can do as a community to keep retail business here and to really grow the small business sector. And Russell, you're going to tell us about, and I was shocked when you shared the major companies that do have a presence in North Carolina.
Right,
I mean, it
and,
speaks
and,
well
and
for
some of
us.
which are here that we just don't think about.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. Be right back. We're back. We want to thank Roger G. Taylor and Associates for making the buzz possible. Be sure and thank Roger, our current chairman of the chamber, when you see him around the community. Russell, you were mentioning the road system and various positives about the state, and I want you to pick up on that a little bit and talk about also the large companies located here.
Right. You know, first of all, one of the things that we did mention was, you know, North Carolina is recognized as being overall, when you look at all the components of taxes, cost of living, and so forth, we are recognized as one of the lowest cost states to do business in. And that certainly helps when you're looking at major employers. I did make the statement before, and I want to correct it. We have the second largest highway system in the nation. We had the largest consolidated rail system. You know, we didn't talk about the airports. 3 international airports, with Charlotte, the hub, being the 6th largest airport in the country in traffic, and so forth. So, you know, just a lot of positives that when we go out and talk to corporate America about doing business in North Carolina, certainly helps.
I want to throw in something there too. The largest concentration of PhDs in America are in the Research Triangle area. And when you have that type of innovative brain power for research and whatnot, I've heard even in California where my kids live, they say, Mom, people really like to come. I mean, they look at that hub as being an extremely attractive place.
Well, you know, I think that's very attributable to the fact that you've got Duke, UNC, and State right there in the triangle, and the grant money that comes into those. But, you know, some of that grant money we see filtering into the job development investment grant community through biotechnology and the things that are going on in science and science technology. But yeah, and it's also interesting, prior to 2008 and the decline we had with the financials there, Charlotte had emerged as the largest city of having a single employment in one sector. Previously, Detroit had been recognized in the country. 70% of the employment base in Detroit was automotive. And that had been surpassed recently by Charlotte, which at one point had grown up to 21% in financial services. Today, I bring it up because Charlotte is the second largest financial center hub outside of New York, and so forth. And yes,
Would have
that
thought
does trickle
Atlanta
down.
or San Francisco or, yeah.
And then let's talk about, you mentioned the companies. One of the areas, aerospace and defense. Here's some of the countries that are in North Carolina already. Boeing, Cessna, FedEx, General Dynamics, General Electric, Honda, Honeywell, which is where? Right here in Rocky Mount. Northrop Grumman, Purolator, Raytheon, Spirit. Then let's talk about the biotechnology medical side. Archer Daniels, Baxter, Bayer, Biogen, GlaxoSmithKline, LabCorp, Merck, Novartis, Novo, Pfizer, PPD
Which
in
is
Wilmington,
here now, too.
which is here now too. So, I mean, and then you go to the financial sector with BB&T, Citigroup, Fidelity, PNC, and I'm doing it off the memory without reading the notes. But so, corporate America is already in North Carolina. What we're trying to do is help them grow more in North Carolina.
And pull them to our area, which is where Alan comes in too. Alan, I have to say, people tell me all the time that the cost of living, speaking of cost of living and all, is so desirable in Rocky Mount. And I would think that would be in your arsenal of how to recruit businesses.
Most definitely is, and particularly with those type of companies that Russell's speaking about now, that it's very important that they use that as a tool, and they do when they're selling our community versus other areas in our state that are also great places to do business. We're also a great place to do business. It just costs a little less to do it here.
Right.
So we're happy about that as a recruitment tool. I don't know if this is too big of a leap from what Russell was just chatting with, but as we were talking about small business, and maybe Russell, you can add to this, the comment about 70% of our economy takes place with what we've been talking about in small business. And so it's a very important indicator, I'm sure, consumer spending, that is, in the stock market. And that's where you spend your days every day. So y'all watch that indicator. So I'm sure it's important to people that invest in America too. So to maybe just make a statement to those in retail right now that may be going through some of these difficult times which we've been through. Some call it a depression, some call it a recession, but it was bad for all businesses. I would say to all the small businesses in town, to focus on the fact that yes, we're going to have to deal with e-commerce, and everybody embraces e-commerce. I can't think of anybody that doesn't walk around with one of these in their hands. So you can stand in a cornfield and order about anything that you want. Christmas time, you can sit on the couch and order Christmas, and my wife has done some of that, fortunately not all of it, because we do like to shop in the experience side. So convenience is always going to lie with the e-commerce side, and it won't go away, but it will level off. But I would say to existing small businesses, focus on the experience. Be kind to the customer like you should be anyway, the way we remembered as kids. So I think businesses right now have a great opportunity, small businesses, to capture on the mergers going on with the big businesses. Big businesses are getting lesser in numbers as they are merging. You talked about the banks a while ago. So while e-commerce is doing what it's doing, and it's doing it at the tune of about 17 cents out of every dollar, there's an opportunity for the small businesses, I think, to not only ramp up the experience for the consumer, certainly in the mall areas, which are, that's a whole nother story, because malls are sort of dissipating across the country. We still have our mall here, but to improve the experience is a great thing for them to go after right now. And again, it's a little bit of a leap from what we were talking about, the large companies, but small business is important. I want to be sure we got that in.
Well, and speaking of that, American Express does such a good job with Small Business Saturday right before Christmas to encourage people. And if y'all watch some of our competitive stations, they're touting keep your dollars local. And it makes a huge difference if instead of sending them to someplace out of state or whatever, if you're sorry that a certain retail business is left or a certain restaurant is left, it might be because we're not patronizing it. I mean, we need to be cognizant of supporting our local people.
I would say, and maybe this is talking to both large and small, Russell and I, or both, and working on creating the right environment to improve not only small business but large business too. And Russell may want to talk a little bit about the I-44 corridor, but before he does, I'm going to just finish my comment by saying, knowing that changes take place, knowing that retail moves about, not just in Rocky Mount, retail's moved in Wilson, that's a neighbor, retail moves in Raleigh, it moves everywhere. So as we go, the hub being downtown to Terrytown, and then we go from Terrytown to Golden East Mall, and we know that the mall's life expectancies are 30 plus years, plus the trend for malls are changing. I am working to try to create the right environment for the next change in Rocky Mount, which will be more for our children, and hopefully for me too. So we're working to create the right environment, identifying locations where we can capture more consumer spending from those traveling north and south on Interstate 95, and now those traveling east and west on I-495, soon to be I-44, if you want to comment on that.
Tell us, Russell.
I have yet to determine where the I-44 number came from.
At the bridge.
But everybody, I'm sure, in the audience has seen the 495 signs between here and Raleigh. And obviously the impetus there is to make from 95 going into Wake County and Interstate Corridor 495. The larger move after that will be to take US 64 from 95 through Williamston up to Elizabeth City into the Chesapeake area to make that an interstate corridor. Obviously, part of that would be to tie ourselves into the Norfolk port. That's not taking anything away from Wilmington and Moorhead. It's expected over the next 5 years that the Norfolk port will increase its traffic 35% because of the expansion from the Panama Canal. I can't think of a better outlet for us in northeast North Carolina would be to that interstate corridor from I-44, Elizabeth City, and Williamston, Elizabeth City. And then the 17 corridor there, what that does to tie us down into the coastal region and into Wilmington and so forth. So we're looking at how do we make that happen. Obviously, that is a federal, state, local issue, and it's not going to happen overnight. The governor has made it one of his top priorities. That doesn't hurt. It is already receiving a lot of attention in Washington for funding and so forth. So that also, when we look at the Kingsborough super site that we've seen and talked about recently, that just heightens the importance and the awareness of that site and the availability there. If we would be successful in attracting I like the word transformative opportunity to the Kingsborough site, then the peripheral of what that does in the northeastern North Carolina, the employment base, is just phenomenal.
Of course, we're so grateful for Capital Broadcasting and their big investment too with the brew mill.
No doubt.
Got a lot of great
That's
things.
exciting.
It is exciting. So state level, local level, but also always going to be local too.
Always local. Always local.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing the great news. Appreciate what y'all are doing.
Gene, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the invite.
See you next week.